upset the established order, and everything becomes chaos.
We start with a villain who looked at human civilization and saw how fragile it really is. The Joker from The Dark Knight doesn't carry a bomb, he carries an audit. Gotham's Clown Prince isn't trying to watch the world burn, he's trying to prove that we're the ones holding the matches. His entire strategy rests on one destabilizing hypothesis.
When the chips are down, these civilized people, they'll eat each other.
When he forces Batman into a mass surveillance trap or locks two fairies into a psychological standoff, he's not committing crimes. He's running a hostile audit of civilization itself. The film does push back. The citizens on those boats choose humanity over survival. But the terrifying part isn't the outcome. It's how close he drags us to the edge before they make that choice. He makes you stop looking at the makeup and start looking at how fragile the social contract really is.
See, I'm not a monster. I'm just ahead of the curve.
What happens when that contract snaps completely and a broken justice system builds the one man qualified to dismantle it?
It's not what you know, Clyde, it's what you can prove in court.
Clyde Shelton from Law Abiding Citizen watched his family get murdered, then watched the killer walk on a plea deal. And that single betrayal turned him into a one-man war against the entire legal infrastructure of Philadelphia. His worldview is brutal and simple.
I'm going to bring the whole fucking diseased, corrupt temple down on your head.
When the law starts caring more about conviction rates than actual justice, the law forfeits its legitimacy. As a former government assassin, he turns the system's own loopholes and bureaucratic complacency into a weapon against it. The film frames his rising body count as a slide into madness, and it is. But the grievance underneath it never stops being unsettling, because it taps into a real fear that the system meant to protect us might care more about closing the file than getting it right. Clyde forced a single city to answer for its complacency. Our next case operates on a scale no city could ever contain. Mass slaughter, wrapped in the cold language of resource math. That's how Thanos reshaped what a cinematic villain could be. He doesn't want rule, worship, or wealth. In his own mind, he's a tragic, solitary savior, stuck with the grim job of cutting a bursting population in half so the rest might survive.
If life is left unchecked, life will cease to exist. It needs correction.
You don't know that!
I'm the only one who knows that.
Total, unshakable conviction is where his power comes from. There's no hatred behind it, just an icy calculation. One he's willing to carry through even at the cost of his own daughter, all to reach what he calls equilibrium.
Perfectly balanced, as all things should be.
When the plan succeeds, he retires to a quiet farm to watch the sunrise. He remains one of modern cinema's most unsettling images, a villain who genuinely believes he saved the universe, while the rest of us are left holding the wreckage of a calculation that never asked us if we agreed with the math. If you're enjoying a look into the minds of villains who actually make sense, hit subscribe so you don't miss the rest of the list. Thanos ran his math across a cosmic void. Magneto never needed the math. He already lived through the worst version of the argument. Eric Lenscher survived the Holocaust as a child, and that single fact rewrites everything about how Magneto sees the mutant struggle. He doesn't fear prejudice in theory. He's lived its absolute worst version.
Let them pass that law and they'll have you in chains with a number burned into your forehead.
That trauma builds an unshakable skepticism toward Xavier's dream of peaceful coexistence. To Eric, it isn't noble, it's naive. He looks at humanity's track record and forecasts with total confidence that once ordinary humans realize they're being outpaced, registration turns into incarceration, and incarceration turns into extermination. He strikes first not out of a desire for tyranny, but out of a vow.
Never again.
Because his radicalism is forged in the darkest chapter of human history, the audience gets stuck in an uncomfortable spot. We want Xavier to be right. History keeps suggesting Magneto understands people better. His fight was about stopping a cycle of violence before it started. What happens once that cycle wins anyway, and civilization collapses into something that runs on fear instead of law? Total submission in exchange for protection. That's the entire pitch. Negan flips the post-apocalyptic survival story on its head. The savior system runs on one brutal transaction. And Negan argues, without flinching, that free will is a luxury that gets people killed in a world overrun by the dead. When he forces Rick Grimes to his knees, it's not just a power move. It's an attempt to break the illusion that the heroes are inherently righteous. From his side, Rick's people are tribal raiders who slaughtered his men in their sleep. The brutal public executions aren't cruelty for its own sake. To Negan, they're a utilitarian tool to keep order and prevent a bigger war. He leaves us with an ugly equation. When civilization collapses, a brutal tyrant might be the most effective survival architecture there is. That same brutal pragmatism takes on a political edge once it's fighting for a nation instead of just a settlement.
The whole of the underground, united as one. The nation of Zorn.
Drugs were never the business. Independence was. To Silco, Zorn isn't a playground for profit. It's an oppressed nation, choked and starved by the wealth of Piltover above. Flooding the Undercity with shimmer isn't driven by personal greed as much as ruthless pragmatism.
You see, power, real power, doesn't come to those who are born strongest. No, it comes to those who will do anything to achieve it.
He believes a nation has to bleed if it ever wants sovereignty. Sincerity is what pushes him past a generic power broker. He genuinely loves his people's cause, even while his methods stay monstrous. His bond with Jinx is the emotional core of everything, and it creates an impossible conflict.
We'll show them. We will show them all.
He spends his life fighting for an independent Zorn, then chooses her, his surrogate daughter, over the dream he built his entire identity around. He leaves behind a legacy nobody can clean up. Silco fought for a population the Empire refused to see as human. What comes next doesn't see humanity as a population at all, just a diagnosis waiting to be run. What do you call a program that's diagnosed the species it's supposed to monitor? That's Agent Smith from The Matrix. Smith delivers a verdict on all of humanity.
Human beings are a disease, a cancer of this planet. You are a plague, and we are the cure.
Strength inside the Matrix isn't what makes him unsettling. It's the clinical coldness of the logic. From the perspective of a system built for equilibrium, humanity's chaos is an anomaly that has to be contained. Even trapped inside his own programming, his contempt for the organic world feels earned. He becomes a mirror, forcing the audience to look at our relationship with the planet and wonder if the machine's assessment is closer to the truth than we'd like. Our next villain reached a strikingly similar conclusion from the inside, after watching his own people get left behind for generations. Centuries of colonial trauma and Wakandan isolationism walk into the story wearing Eric Kilmonger's face. His critique lands, and it lands hard. A hyper-advanced superpower sat on its hands while millions of black people suffered globally. He isn't wrong about history. He isn't wrong about Wakanda's complicity either. Method is where he turns villain. He wants to trade global oppression for imperial conquest of his own. T'Challa beats him, but Kilmonger pulls off something almost no cinematic antagonist manages. He wins the ideological debate completely. By the end, the hero doesn't go back to the old status quo.
All of you are wrong! To turn your backs on the rest of the world!
Kilmonger had to die because his methods were soaked in blood. But his argument was true enough to force the hero to rebuild the world around it. Kilmonger fought a system built on centuries of silence. What comes next isn't a system at all, it's an inevitability. No army, no scheme, just an ending nobody gets to negotiate. Death from Puss in Boots shows up as a twin-blade wielding wolf, and he isn't here for power. He's here out of pure disgust, watching a hero burn through 9 lives like they're disposable. He has no plan. There's no need for one. Total inevitability is the real weapon. He's the one wall nobody outsmarts, outruns, or bargains with. The film tracks Puss growing from arrogance into humility, and death is the reason why. His presence drags the entire tone from light-hearted fairy tale into something closer to existential dread. He's not punishing Puss for being alive. He's punishing him for treating the one finite thing he has like it was infinite.
Death ends lives without needing a reason. Our next villain needed exactly 7. 1 for every sin he believed the world had stopped noticing. For John Doe from 7, murder isn't an impulse. It's a structured sermon. Society, in his eyes, has gone numb to ordinary cruelty. Nothing registers anymore. So he forces the 7 deadly sins out into the open, turning each victim's own vice into the method of their death. Strip away the violence, and what's left is a complete absence of ego. He sees himself as an instrument, not a man. A fanatic who's willing to die to finish the piece. When he forces Detective Mills into that final trap, you see the full depth of the calculation. He didn't just kill people. He engineered an inescapable scenario that forces his own executioner to prove his worldview correct. Doe used 7 deaths to expose a moral apathy nobody wanted to admit to. Bane's method is louder and far more theatrical. He needs an entire city to believe a lie before he'll let it fall.
Pure evil.
I'm necessary evil.
Gotham gets its city back. That's the lie. On the surface, Bane's war looks like class warfare. He storms the stock exchange, strips the wealthy of everything, and hands the keys back to the people. It's seductive because it echoes real exhaustion with corruption and inequality. Then the illusion collapses. The revolution is theater. Every speech about liberation is just buying Gotham false hope before its execution. His ideology was never meant to save Gotham's forgotten. It was meant to give them false hope right before a nuclear bomb goes off.
Of Gotham's reckoning, here to end the borrowed time you've all been living on.
He's unsettling because he shows exactly how easily real grievances can be hijacked by a charismatic monster. Bane's lie was built for an audience of millions. This next deception only had to convince a single person, himself. In his own mind, Knox from Wakfu already won. The math just hasn't caught up yet. Grief did this. Grief and the corrupting power of the Elia Cube turned a father into a mass murderer who believes his own atrocities don't count, because if his plan works, none of it will have happened. He's draining the life force of entire nations to rewind time 200 years and save his family. That belief makes him impossible to reason with, because in his own mind, his body count is already 0. The gut punch comes at the very end. After a campaign of mass destruction, he finally gets enough power to rewind time. Not 2 centuries, 20 minutes. The realization that everything he did is permanent, that the math never worked, breaks him completely.
I'm coming, my darlings.
He stays one of animation's most devastating villains because his evil came from a love so desperate it blinded him to reality. The next villain isn't after decades or centuries. He just wants 4 measly years. and even that gets denied. Roy Batty from Blade Runner was built by humanity, then discarded by it, and he had a 4-year deadline to prove that was a mistake. A modern Prometheus, made of synthetic flesh and given an expiration date instead of a soul, Roy Batty was built for slave labor in the off-world colonies. His rebellion isn't about conquest, it's about panic, the desperate kind. He comes back to Earth to find his creator, Dr. Tyrell, and demand a way past his 4-year lifespan. Underneath the brutality is the most human motive there is, the right to keep existing. On a rain-soaked rooftop, in his final moments, he shifts from predator to philosopher. He saves the life of the man sent to kill him, an act of grace his makers swore a machine could never manage. His final monologue isn't just grief for himself, proof that the slave understood wonder better than the masters ever did. Our final entry is a weapon built by the state, turning around to demand the receipts. Picture a war hero the government quietly erased, turning a tourist destination into a heavily armed fortress. General Francis X. Hummel from The Rock isn't after the money, he's after receipts. This isn't the usual power-hungry rogue archetype. It's a man radicalized by his own loyalty. He takes Alcatraz hostage with a stockpile of VX gas, and his demand isn't wealth. It's a compensation fund for the families of covert Marines the government let die, then erased from the record. And the tension comes from a brutal fact. He's right. The state did betray those men. His willingness to threaten civilians is what makes him the villain, but his hesitation to actually pull the trigger reveals the patriot still buried underneath. If these villains made you question who was actually right, hit subscribe so you don't miss our next deep dive into the dark side of cinema.